I arrived in Perth in late 2005 to take up the residency. I think what happened was I had to have a total immersion in his poetry, and at first I felt a bit of resistance to that, and I also felt, I had to do it. I didn't necessarily have to like it initially, and also I read a lot of his diary entries. And I think there's no doubt that he was depressed, and who wouldn't be, with such a crippling illness, Yes. Yeah. I mean, he had a fairly strong sense that once he went to bed in that room, he was never coming out again, and so it proved, So he was, I would say he did have depression. I mean, he was capable of humour and liveliness, and I think those visitors who were such a trial to him, in some ways, were saving of him, because they forced him to put on a brave face, and I think that probably did cut down the amount of time he had for very, very brooding introspection. But I mean, he was undoubtedly a brooder, And probably the turning point for me came quite late. In 2009, one of the plans that had got me the job in the beginning was I said I thought we should do a play about him. And so what happened was we got together with Perth Youth Theatre, and we staged a play in 2009. But for about a year beforehand, we were working on it with the kids, and I had to find bits of Soutar's poetry and indeed his life to inspire me, so I could write a script that would work on stage, and that did completely change my feeling about his poetry. Actually,
really,
yeah.
Really?
And I think, to be fair, not everything he wrote was great. I would say he wrote too much. He wrote every day, and I mean, I think writers should write every day, but he kept everything, really, and there's a lot that he wrote that is subpar, to be honest. But every now and again he would write something that is absolutely magical and will endure.
You got to know the man, do you think?
I think I did. I didn't fall in love with him, as so many people who came to see me in order to have a look around the house had fallen in love with him.
Why do you think that happened? Why would they fall in love with... Be falling in love with an idea? It's an
idea of someone... It's an idea of missed potential, which I think some people find very, very haunting. And he was a good-looking man. And I think people could slot themselves into a relationship with them in their heads where... although there were all these people coming to see him day after day, if they'd got to see him and sit with him, something extra special might have happened. That may be very unfair of me to speculate in this way, but definitely I would say people were half in love with him, at least.
That's
some of the
interesting,
people
because
came.
We're not talking about one or two individuals. This is...
Well,
a phenomenon.
Yes, I mean, I'm calling it a phenomenon. I mean, how many do you need for a phenomenon? Half a dozen, probably,
Yeah.
But yes, whereas I never felt quite like that. I could feel his frustration very strongly, and as a writer, you're no secret, and nobody who writes is a secret to frustration. There's times when it goes badly, there's times when you doubt yourself and your abilities. You think, is this, whether it's a poem or a novel, is this really worth continuing with? Shouldn't I just dump it in the bin? So he had self-doubt, and I recognise that, and I recognise, although fortunately I've been spared it, the self-doubts of a man who never actually got married and who felt that as a lack in himself. I mean, obviously he was a man with a man's needs, so there's all that stuff, but I don't just mean that. He felt that there was a journey to full adulthood which he'd never really completed because he'd never got married.
Right.
I think he felt that. He felt very very, very tender towards his parents and very grateful. And I think, although I think Jack Soutar, his father, was quite a formidable man, and by all accounts, was not someone crossed by his employees lightly. I think it was a household with plenty of laughter, I think it was a warm and loving household. And he felt, on the one hand, very, very grateful and tender towards his parents, but also terribly guilty, because he knew, he demanded a lot of them. I mean, to look after an invalid is a big job, even with a maid. And the other thing was, he knew he was going to put them to the pain of predeceasing them, and so it proved.